Today, the Ascended Masters teach us the how-to of Taoism, and they illustrate the steps of the soul's self-transcendence through the chart of your divine self. It is the chart of the Tao, the De, and the lower self whose goal it is to attain bonding to both. The chart that you see before you shows three figures, the upper, the middle, and the lower figure. I see the upper figure as the great Tao, the central figure as the great De, and the lower figure, the lower self that is seeking to attain union with both. Our understanding of the great Tao is truly the first cause, Brahman, the universal being of God. As earlier we said, it is the fecund womb of the Great Mother, containing all of cosmos within itself. The great causal body is individualized for each one of us. Lao Tzu taught this. Each one of us has that Tao. And so in this chart, we see that Tao individualized as the divine self, which is above the lower self in vibration and in consciousness. When the consciousness of the lower self begins to equate with that of the higher self, then the two become one, because things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. We see then that the activating force of the De in the central figure is the point of the nexus through the activation and the action of De that is unconscious, perhaps at first conscious and then becoming unconscious. That lower self begins to put on the levels of a higher way and a higher consciousness. The Christians talk about three in one, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. These are also illustrated on this chart. The upper figure represents not only the Father, but the Father-Mother. It is the great sphere of first cause, or the causal body. The terms Father-Mother in Taoism are translated as Yang and Yin. In Taoism, in place of the concentric spheres of light that make up that body, you would see the symbol of the great Tai Chi, otherwise known as the serpent swallowing its tail. That great sphere of wholeness is the source from whence we descended. And the descent means the lowering of vibration, where we have lost the consciousness of this completeness and this wholeness, and therefore we are obliged to abide by rules of right and wrong, this and that, what is moral and what is not moral. And these are relative states of consciousness. The central figure is the great mediator, and this is the meaning of the De. This potentiality of being, this seed potential that is a perfect pattern. That central figure reflects the image and the likeness of God to the lower figure. The lower figure being in the relative state as we are today, conscious of sin and not sin, is not able to perceive the absolute. And so the De has been sent forth. In Christian terms, the De would be the only begotten Son, not in the sense of a human being, but in the sense of the universal Christ. And that universal being, that mediator, is a step down or a going forth of an emanation of light from the great Tao above. The De, then, until we have integrated with it, can be seen as our teacher. We can reach out for it because we know that ultimately our teacher is our real self, or Christ self. The lower figure, then, attempts by meditation, by good works, by an active life of contemplation of the infinite, that oneness and that alignment with that inner self. The inner self mirrors to him his true identity. He can look in the mirror of the der and see how he should be, because he does not know how he should be. And that's why he makes up rules of right and wrong. In communion with the der, the individual finds that point of equilibrium where he can be that der in action without being conscious of it. The merging of the lower figure, then, with the central figure in this chart is a daily walk in contemplation of the source that is sent forth, this mediator, to restore us to the whole. The Tao is not a personless, mindless, impersonal being. The Tao manifests the full personality and impersonality of the law and the lawgiver. We can know love from the great Tao, and we can know a loving, brooding presence that has lowered its vibration to the level of the middle figure and compels us to raise our vibration to the level of the middle figure. The middle figure in the chart is a level of consciousness that we had and knew in past golden ages when we had not gone out from the Tao and the Der. Lao Tzu came to restore that state of mind. Because the lower self cannot enter that mind and understand that mind, the lines of the Tao De Jing are written in an enigmatic way, in a mystical way, because we are being taught something that the limited capacity of the mortal mind cannot contain. And therefore, by the mystery and the enigma of the teaching, we are forced to not go through this mind to understand it, but rather to appropriate the very mind that contains it, represented by that inner self or Christ self as the middle figure in the chart. The great avatars of all ages who have come to liberate us have been the full embodiment of that middle figure. And they have been greatly overshadowed by and many times been bonded to also the upper figure. Therefore, they have walked the earth with the shining halo of their own causal body, such as the Buddhas who embody the Dharmakaya. Buddhists call the upper figure in this chart the Dharmakaya. It is the highest body of light. We call the body the causal body, and the figure within it that has identity, the I am that I am, or the I am presence. Holiness, then, is a successive putting on of the garment of the Der and the Tao. And the Der comes first because it is closer to us in vibration. Were we to attempt to now jump into the infinite sea of God's being, into the great Tao, we would be annihilated because we have not internalized it. Only those who internalize God, or the I am that I am, or the Tao, can merge with it without having the annihilation of personality and of soul. This wonderful teaching of Lao Tzu gives us an Eastern view of the ancient teaching which has been delivered to us today through the Ascended Masters. It is the teaching which Jesus Christ gave to his disciples and Gautama Buddha gave to his. As we contemplate these teachings, let us reflect upon the chart. Let us recognize that the flame that we see around ourself, represented in the lower figure, is an all-consuming flame, a flame we can invoke. It is the flame of sacred fire, the flame of the Holy Spirit. It is called the violet flame, and it transmutes or erases the state of consciousness that is less than the Tao. And we find that as that state of consciousness is effaced and is discarded by us as a snakeskin or a conch shell, we no longer inhabit it, that therefore a vacuum is left. The vacuum is created by this transmutation, and so the higher self descends because we are becoming more like that higher self in vibration, the higher self being the middle figure in the chart. Continuing with the analysis of chapter 38, Cooper says, "No other system exposes and ridicules moral sham more ruthlessly or with more zest and humor than that of Lao Tzu." The Zhuangzi, the Taoist classic attributed to the sage Zhuangzi, says, "To employ goodness as a passport to influence is an everlasting shame. It is useless to preach morality and charity and all the conventional virtues before reaching the heart of the example of one's own disregard for name and fame." After listening to a pious dissertation on the virtues of self-sacrifice and charity, Lao Tzu exclaims, "What stuff! Is not your elimination of self a positive manifestation of self? I say to deny self is to affirm self. The dot in the center of the circle is the only place where self is and is not. If you have to eliminate self, then you have a self. Get beyond that. Go to that dot in the center of the circle, the equilibrium of the middle figure in the chart and the upper figure in the chart." Cooper says, Taoism teaches that virtue must also be an inward quality. The Zhuangzi says, "Unless there is a suitable endowment within, Tao will not abide. Unless there is outward correctness, Tao will not operate." This endowment of the Tao is that seed potential. It is the flame of the heart, and it is the De of the inner self, the real self that is the Christ. Cooper explains, "The possessor of true virtue has no air of smugness about him, nor does he criticize others." Kaltenmark's comment on Lao Tzu's teaching on chapter 38 on the descent from the highest virtue to the lesser virtues of human-heartedness, righteousness, and propriety is, "When human-heartedness becomes a conscious activity limited to particular objects, it is degraded in its turn. A still more inferior virtue crops up, that is, deliberate generosity, righteousness, and lower still, ritual-mindedness, when acts are prompted merely by a desire to make a handsome gesture by decorum and etiquette. The rites are indeed the opposite of the Taoist ideal. They were instituted to mark distinctions, divisions, and classes." Two biographies of Confucius that record a supposed meeting he had with Lao Tzu. These reveal Lao Tzu's position on propriety and rituals. Lao Tzu is said to have been about 20 years older than Confucius. Many believe these accounts to be legendary, but they nevertheless reveal the stance Lao Tzu would have taken. The first passage is, "Confucius went to Zhou to consult Lao Tzu on rituals. Lao Tzu said, 'Those whom you talk about are dead, and their bones have decayed. Only their words have remained. When the time is proper, the superior man rides in a carriage, but when it is not, he covers himself up and staggers away. I have heard that a good merchant hides his treasures as if his store were empty, and that a gentleman with full virtue, De, appears like a stupid man. Get rid of your proud air and many desires, your overbearing manners and excessive ambitions. None of these are good for you. This is what I tell you.' Confucius left and told his pupils, 'I know birds can fly, fish can swim, and animals can run. That which runs can be trapped, That which swims can be netted, and that which flies can be shot. As to the dragon, I don't know how it rides on the winds and clouds and ascends to heaven. Lao Tzu, whom I saw today, is indeed like a dragon. Chen writes, the meeting of Confucius and Lao Tzu was also recorded by the grand historian in the biography of Confucius. There, Lao Tzu gave Confucius the following parting words. I heard that the rich give gifts of money, the virtuous give gifts of speech. I am not rich. May I be an impostor of virtue to give you some gift of speech. Those clever with sharp observations, who yet are fond of criticizing others, are courting death. Those with wide and discriminating learning, who yet expose the evils of others, put their own lives in danger. As a son, avoid such pitfalls. As a minister, avoid such pitfalls. Chen says, Lao Tzu made it clear that the essence of ritual consists not in parading one's own merits or exposing other people's evils, which are the ways to death, but in being humble and yielding, qualities conducive to long life. This is a familiar refrain also in the Bible. Pride is the way to death, while humility is the way to life. From Lao Tzu's speech, we get the impression that Confucius was an ambitious young man, full of zeal to cultivate virtue, eradicate evil, and above all to be the savior of the world. This moral zeal, fired by the desire for fame and puffed up with pride and self-righteousness, was in need of a dressing down. The encounter with Lao Tzu proved beneficial. Afterward, Confucius was said to become more reserved and contemplative, while his disciples also made progress. This is the end of a quote by Ellen Chen. Concerning the same teaching on judgment, you know that Jesus said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." Let us take up chapter 38, line 11. As for propriety or ritual behavior, it is but the thin edge of loyalty and sincerity and the beginning of disorder. Ellen Chen says the word translated by Hendricks as propriety in its etymology means religious sacrifice. She says traditionally the author Lao Tzu was an instructor of rites, but the Tao Te Ching's overall attitude toward ritual is negative. In chapter 38, ritual, coming after human-heartedness and righteousness, occupies the last stage of moral development, such that it actually marks human alienation from the divine. We can clearly see this as so many people in our own time confuse ritual with true spiritualization of consciousness. There is more emphasis placed on the performance of the ritual than the content of the ritual. When we have both the form and the content, then of course the ritual becomes our self, and it has a true meaning and a true reason for being in our lives. Chen says ritual behavior externally manifests an inner awareness of one's separateness from the divine. If you have to go through ritual, then you're saying, I am separate from the divine. Thus one treats the holy as the other with reverence and awe, and not as one's inner self and inner potential of being. In the deepest sense, rituals are designed to reconnect us to the divine. Standing on their own, however, they are mere appearance, without substance or solidarity. The religion of ritual is the religion of the Pharisees, bordering on irreligion. That is the end of the quote from Chen. Cooper says that the Taoist view is that the stable, guiding lines of custom lull man into feeling that all is well without, while all may be ill within. She also explains how the Taoist idea of ritual sacrifice has to do with coming into harmony with the Tao. Coming into harmony with something means coming into the same vibration with. And if we look at the lower figure on the chart and the upper figure, the soul in embodiment and the I am presence, what we are saying is that the only true harmony between the two is when, through the middle figure, the mediator, the soul is able to raise its vibrations. The individual can raise the vibrations of the chakras and the aura to be now in polarity with the upper figure. And in that polarity, the middle figure is at the nexus. And you can see this polarity by drawing a figure 8. The upper figure is the Tao, the lower figure, the soul, and the state of becoming. But it all takes place through the mediator, which is the De, the real self, the Christ. Cooper says, in Taoism there is no sacrifice to obtain pardon, no prophetic element which is bound up with anthropomorphism, and no prayers for personal favors. Any prayer must be for guidance to carry out the will of heaven. When you think about that, the prayer for guidance to carry out the will of heaven, if we will continue pursuing that prayer, we will become all of these things. By embodying God's will, we obtain pardon because we have eliminated the difference between ourselves and God. We have accepted his will. We need no prophetic element, for we are within the will of God. We need no prayers for personal favors. We need no personal favors because we have chosen to embody the will of God, the will of the Tao, the law of the Tao. And God will give us that and teach us how to do it through that beloved teacher, the Christ self. In the ritual sacrifices at the solstices, the emperor, as officiant, did not act the role of propitiator, but put himself in touch with heaven to learn its will and to offer gratitude for former guidance. The decree of heaven was the mandate of the king or emperor to rule the kingdom, but he forfeited this divine right as soon as he failed to act in accordance with the will of heaven. So too, ordinary man had to justify himself before heaven, but favors could not be bought, nor could heaven be influenced by sacrifices. Correct conduct was the means of putting both king and subject into conformity with the will of heaven, and so producing harmony in all relationships in the universe. And correct conduct is being centered in the De, neither this nor that, neither left nor right, but centered. There was no possibility of vicarious sacrifice. As the Mahabharata says, sacrifice does not consist merely of material objects, which are only external. Essentially, it consists in that which comes from the innermost living heart. Hence, only the good man is able to offer sacrifice properly. As Ross comments in the Original Religion of China, the root of sacrifice is the heart. It means that man entertains in his heart no desire which is out of harmony with his true self, and that his outward life is in complete accord with the Tao. He seeks from sacrifice no personal gain, no private advantage. Chapter 38, lines 12 to 16. And foreknowledge is but the flower of the way and the beginning of stupidity. Therefore the great man dwells in the thick and doesn't dwell in the thin, dwells in the fruit and doesn't dwell in the flower. Therefore he rejects that and takes this. Arthur Waley translates this: foreknowledge may be the flower of doctrine, but it is the beginning of folly. Therefore the full-grown man, that is full-grown in Tao, takes his stand upon solid substance, and not upon mere husk, upon the fruit and not upon the flower. Truly, he rejects that and takes this. Life is a never-ending process of choices, right choices, to take the enduring, the true, the balanced, and leave the rest. Every day we are saying, this, not that, this, not that. To do this, we must come into attunement with that mind of the middle figure in the chart. That is the image and likeness of the Tao. The image and likeness of the Tao is the De. Ellen Chen says, foreknowledge is knowledge through the art of divination. According to the Tao Te Ching, divination is necessary only when humans have lost direct access to the Tao. It is better to never depart from the Tao and De, never acquire any moral consciousness, and thus never need recourse to the art of divination, which is but the flowering of Tao and the beginning of stupidity. When you become aware of the Tao as a thing apart from yourself, that is when the flowering of the Tao, like the knowledge of the Tao, is the beginning of stupidity. When you know the Tao internally, within your own sense of being, then you have the foundation of true oneness and of the soul's bonding to the Tao. Regarding the phrase, therefore the great man dwells in the thick and doesn't dwell in the thin, Chen says, nature or the unconscious is the thick, while virtue or consciousness is the thin. The Taoist's choice is the thick hidden kernel where life resides, not the thin flower pertaining merely to appearance. That is the end of the quote by Ellen Chen and the end of our commentary of Chapter 38 of the Der Tao Jing, translated by Robert Henricks. It is wonderful to contemplate the mystery of being through the lens of Taoism and the lens of the heart of Lao Tzu. Let us continue to do so as we look at life in a new dimension, existence here below and as above. I commend you to the Tao Te Ching. I commend you to your heart's meditation on the reality that is within you.